Ryan.
Today we are learning basketball. Matt Powers, aka at Draft Pal, the NBA and the WNBA draft, an editor and co-founder of Swish Theory. Got to represent the Swish folks here.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
work with Stepien, and he's in grad school right now, so studying his master's. So how's that going? And more importantly, how you doing today, Matt?
It's going great. Yeah, I appreciate that shout out. I'm learning again. It's weird to be back in school after 14 years, but yeah, it's nice to be like back at it. Yeah, and right now I'm on winter break. I forgot what like having winter break is like, so I'm like filling that with a lot of like basketball watch. So I've been kind of trying to knock out a lot of scouting reports here.
Hey, well, you're on the right pod to stay learning some basketball and learning off the court too. That's nice. And yeah, I mean, winter break was the best. It's not quite summer break, but it's a nice little. Where else do you get like 3 weeks off in the middle of what you're doing just to relax and reset, get ready for the next semester? So, I'm excited to dive into some different articles you've written with Swish Theory recently, and going back even to last year's big board. We might talk a little Cooper Flagg, a little Zach Edey, all the exciting skilled bigs entering the league recently and upcoming in the future. But before we dive in, I thought maybe you could detail a little bit of your basketball background and kind of your scouting process. Hitting on either one, just what you look for when you're scouting players that tells you this might be a future pro one day.
Yeah, my basketball background is I played a lot. I mean, I was like I was kind of later to the scouting specifically game. But I would just like through my 20s would play like 4 or 5 times a week type deal, and just like very immersed in basketball all my life really. So it's a passion of mine. I also from Richmond, Virginia, which we didn't really have any home basketball team. Like DC, like Wizards were all right, whatever. Hornets were all right, but like. So I kind of just picked up on like young, exciting teams in the NBA, and like the process Sixers were just like absolutely fascinating to me. I would watch like every single game of theirs, and like torture myself just to try to like figure out what they were doing and what their like problem solving process was like. So yeah, from there, I think like the pandemic is when I like really was like, oh, I'm lacking new basketball footage, but I have all this like amateur basketball, this like college international basketball that I can catch up on from the last couple years, and like let's make a big board and like figure it out. So my like scouting philosophy, I would say, has changed quite a bit over the last few years since then. I started out kind of just searching for outliers, like no matter where I kind of would assign probabilities for each outcome, for each like outcome on like an impact curve. So like the odds of you being a +6 player per 100 versus +3. And then I would kind of, and there's like increased benefit to like reaching that 90%, that high end outcome, right? So that's what led to me having guys like Cam Thomas super high, because I was like, if he hits, then he's really going to hit. And like, that's the type of player I want to. So I was very far out the risk reward curve as far as like, just all that matters is it doesn't matter if you take 5 swings, like as long you're going to hit on one of these guys really big. And that's all that matters type deal. Again, like kind of influenced by the process. But since then, I've kind of moved to be more of a, let's try to rank these guys how they'll end up 5 years from now, like more instead of this, like, I don't care if I have some busts, like let's actually rank these guys how I think the order would line up. So last year I graded every prospect on 3 axes, which was your productivity, your feel for the game, and your athleticism. And I kind of built a big board that way. This year, I kind of have changed it once again to be more of like how many layers of the opponent's like defense or offense can you break or hold against. And so it's almost more like a physical approach of like, okay, a 3-pointer breaks 3 levels of the defense, a mid-range shot breaks 1.5 levels, like that type of deal. So I have like a point system based on that. So it's like trying to attribute points to different facets of the game, basically. So I'm grading every prospect on these like 10 different skills and traits, basically. So it's a lot of work, but I feel like it gets I want to get as close as I can to the actual ranking, you know, like I want to be really attuned to how players are playing today, like very specific about how each skill is developed and like, and then try to find the narrative for each skill and like how that might to project it forward. So that's basically my experience in the last few years to catch up.
How do you translate that scouting process to the ever evolving league? And we're about to hop into the idea that there's a modern wave of skilled bigs nowadays. And so, the league is ever changing. I saw this stat as I was preparing that, you know, the league leader in centers that the league leader in 3-point attempts was Chris Bosh 10 years ago, taking 3.8 threes per game. And now that would rank 18th, tied with Chet Holmgren and Joel Embiid among centers. And we think of them as like stretch fives. They're only taking as many as Chris Bosh 10 years ago. And you got, Wemby is just ridiculous. He's taking 9 threes a game. You've got 9 centers over 5 threes a game now. So I think that quick little stat, you think of Mark Cannon, Porzingis, Horford, Jaren Jackson, Karl Anthony Towns, Vucevic, even Alex Sars taking 4.6 as a rookie. Jokic is like the league leader in 3-point percentage as a center, and he's taking 4.6 per game. That's, he's ranked 14th in attempts, and that's obviously compared to 10 years ago where Bosh was only taking 3.8. Obviously, the centers have caught up. Like there was this, vibe for a while of small ball taking over the league, and we hit on it with Lucas Kaplan on the last podcast, where really it's skill ball, and as the size of these players, as the players with more size, I should say, develop these skills, height still tends to be one of the biggest advantages in the NBA, and length, and players that have height, length, and the ball skills will end up getting more touches and more shots because they just have that advantage. So, how do you say, you stay on top of the league to make sure that, your process is ever changing when you're scouting?
Yeah, I think it's like I think the most important thing is knowing where the capacity for skill development is, and like that's something kind of I've adapted to over the years of like, oh, just because somebody has this potential like latent talent doesn't mean it'll actually come to fruition. You need to I know some people are very deterministic, like if you have the talent, it's going to show no matter what. I'm a little I think I started completely contextual, like all that matters is the situation you're in, which I mean, each player is an individual that you're impacted by environmental factors. Scheme can vary dramatically. We know these things, right? So it has to have a dramatic impact. So I think I used to make a big board for every single team to kind of see where their like demand would be. So I've stopped that because that felt a little unhealthy. But yeah, I try to assign kind of values for different traits based on where I think the league is going and where I think that's most important. Because like threes are worth more than mid range, not just because it's worth an extra point. It's because like you can also ramp it up in ways that like you can like create a scheme around how to ramp that up in ways that like mid range might be more stable. So I just try to be like, okay, has this player shown enough to then grant that additional like time to like develop that shot? Like I know we'll talk about Malawach later, but like his touch indicators seem good enough that like there's no reason to not throw him out there and let him take a few threes a game as he figures it out. So I think that allows me to be more optimistic about bigs developing that skill than I would have otherwise, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, touch indicators are really interesting because it's a lot of what scouting is projection, and it's kind of assuming certain skills will translate or develop into reliable skills, and it's obviously just hard to know. Like it is like educated guesswork in one way, but we can also go off of tendencies of what works for other players, and it in terms of shooting, like there's normally indicators that if you have a high free throw percentage, you maybe have shown some form of shooting in the whether it's catch and shoot or pull up shooting, you've done something from downtown at some point in your career, so you flashed it. And then, like you mentioned with Maluak, the touch indicators near the rim, whether it's a floater or just soft touch finishing at the rim, those are generally good indicators that you put it all together. If you have the work ethic to be a good free throw shooter and sit in the gym and practice that all day, and you show soft touch on generally tough shots like floaters or midi pull ups or at the rim or even catch and shoots, that you'll be able to put in that same work ethic with that touch, and it should translate to development from the 3-point range. And like we hit on before, like that's just a weapon that I think bigs especially know they almost have to have in their bag now, or they might not see the floor at the biggest level. Like it's just something that it used to be like just a specialty stretch four, a Ryan Anderson coming just sitting out there waiting near half court for the catch and shoot, to now it's like I said before, 20 different players basically are taking as many as the or more as the leader was among centers 10 years ago. Like now it's just commonplace. Like Brooke Lopez extended his career by adding a 3-point shot, and that he was considered a big brute post up option for a while. And Blake Griffin kind of did something similar where he worked on it and busted it out later in his career. And a lot of players have done that because that's just where the league is trending. So we might as well dive right into some of these big men that are on the rise. Obviously the modern wave of skilled bigs is taking over. We've hit on some of them, but Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo are perennially in the MVP race, with Shea and Luka knocking on the door. But those three have pretty much finished top 3, top 5 in voting when they're healthy the past 5 years running. You got Victor Wembanyama on the rise, coming for all the awards real quick for the foreseeable future. You got Chet Holmgren, Evan Mobley, Karl Anthony Towns, Jaren Jackson, Bam Adebayo, just all these bigs with different skills, even Sabonis as a handoff hub, Sengun as a handoff hub. Like the big man has to do something more these days offensively, generally speaking, to be a really involved part of the offense. Like if you're really special defender, you can probably get away with just being a rim roller, play finisher, still on the right setting. Like there's room for all skills. If you bring two-way impact, you can find playing time in the right role. But like a lot of centers just have to, bring a 3-point shot. They have to have some sort of handoff, some sort of playmaking hub, either out of the post, out of the high post, maybe the top of the key, just somewhere where they can be something of a playmaking hub for the offense to run through. And it's becoming more of a trend over and over, whether it's that 3-point shot or the handoff hub for a lot of bigs around the NBA. And so, we just had some interesting bigs enter the league, and we've got some other interesting bigs on their way into the league. So I thought we might start with your big board from 2024 with Zach Edey as the number one player on that big board. A shock to some, but a no-brainer to you. Like you know what you're looking for here. We can pull up the Swish Theory for the people watching at home on the video. Check out theswishtheory.com for all of Matt's work here, and you can find some of my articles there too, and the whole teams. And so I can scroll through some of the big board here, but let's start with the big man himself, Zach Edey. And what I'd like you to do is basically settle my worries. So I'll play the devil's advocate of what some of my concerns were for him entering the league. At its core, the defensive mobility, the classic, like, can Rudy Gobert hang on the perimeter against Luka or Steph in the playoffs idea of, does he have the defensive versatility to be able to play different coverages, switch on the perimeter, and guard the other players' wings when it matters most throughout a playoff series? Or is he going to be someone that gets picked on in that style? And with that being said, you can also tell me all the things he does well, because obviously he's a walking mismatch in the post. He has been all 4 years at Purdue. I think it was 4 years, but he, obviously won National Player of the Year. It's just all the accolades you can think of. And he's a defensive anchor, like down low. Like you're not moving him. He's strong as heck. He can protect the rim. He can finish strong at the rim. I didn't see a ton of shooting indicators outside of the paint, away from the rim. And I'm a little worried about that perimeter defense switchability. So, where do you think he's at, and what role do you really think he can thrive in for the Grizzlies long term?
Well, of all the lotto picks to play at least 500 minutes, do you know who's leading in 3-point percentage?
Oh, wow. What, Edey himself?
One Zachary Edey.
Oh, wow.
He's at 1 a game and shooting 39% on them. So he's 11 for 28 right
He's a
now.
stretch big. There it is.
So you can't guard him, first of all. So like every three is an open three. So I think that like I trust the touch, man. He shot 70% very consistently in college, which like translates usually to more often to like low 30 percentage, which I think is like fine. More than happy to like especially if again like he's getting all open looks, right? Like he's gonna I think he's gonna convert them at a decent rate. I spoke on Chucking Darts podcast about this for a while, and I was like, yeah, I think there's a chance he shoots, and he's been out there shooting so far. So that's an element. I think they haven't really necessarily optimized him on offense at all either, really. It's like not a priority for them considering their place in the standings. And they don't really necessarily need that from him right now, but he's kind of just like sets a lot of screens, like kind of almost like a duck and dive big where he like just stands in the dunker spot and like tries to do like late post ups that they are not really feeding him, I think, right now. So I think there is room for efficiency to improve even from like a really good place where it's at. He's shooting like 49% on hook shots. So it's like that was kind of my thing with Edey going to the league is like a lot of the time you're going to get rim looks that he'll convert at a very, very high rate. If that doesn't work, if he's getting like double, triple teamed or whatever, he has a hook shot where he's going to still shoot 45 to 50%. And that's the worst look you're going to get from Zach Edey. So like, that's like very, and you can like scale that up really quickly because he's such a big guy. He can get a shot off, he can get those hook shots off. So I think they can run more. Obviously I had him number one, so I'm like very optimistic on him, but I don't see why he can't continue to like be more of an integral part of the offense. I think Ja has enjoyed playing with him. I feel like I think it's a pretty big adjustment throwing in like a player of his type. But on defense, he's looked great. I think like on estimated plus minus, he's like 80th percentile or something for defense. He's just like a big guy who takes up a lot of room and can move pretty well, like most of the time that's going to be a positive defender, like you kind of almost don't even like here. Yeah. Sorry. I'm looking up his EPM numbers like a nerd. Yeah. He's 88th percentile in defense by EPM, right? A lot of that is just like, he's so good at boxing out. Like he's going to grab a lot of boards, which like boosts your defense. On offense, he's been dominating the glass. I think he has like one of the highest, if not the highest, offensive rebound rate. Or no. Yeah, he's rebounding 7.2% of it. I don't know. I saw some stat they have like a 30% offensive rebound rate when he's on the floor just because like he draws so much rim gravity that like you have to give attention to him. So, my thing is Edey might be a stretch big, which it looks like he is already. He might be able to move and like not get killed on switches, which he's kind of shown that he won't. And like you can scale up his offense really easily, and like you can. He's been effective even without really having anything designed for him. I want them to do more like just bail out post ups instead of taking like contested pull ups. Just like let him take a hook shot and like. That's going to be decent late clock offense, So yeah, that's my general pitch. Zach Edey.
Yeah, he definitely has those definitely has the traditional big man skills. Like that's been clear since day one. And you hit on that he's launching a three per game at a good rate. And I think at like the switchability, the perimeter defense could come down the line. And I don't know if it's there yet. I know that like recently they've been putting him out on the perimeter a lot and it almost feels like some regular season experimentation to see how he does. And I think that's good for him because obviously he hustles, obviously he cares, obviously he's putting effort out there. And maybe sometimes he's a little slow footed or a little slow and half a second goes by and he loses an advantage to a quicker guard. And that's not fair for most bigs, obviously being switched out there. So, I think it's to be seen if maybe that will, I don't know, come up in the playoffs over a series, if that's something like maybe he'll get picked on switches. But I honestly don't know how many teams are talented enough to really do that as much as we might think in theory. And he's definitely shown that like he, he's trying and he's long and he's moving his feet. He's out there on the perimeter, able to do different coverages. So, I think there's definitely like there's more hope than I originally thought in terms
Yeah.
of the perimeter. And yeah, I mean you've hit on the touch. Like I think he's shown more than I necessarily realized. At least because like I always thought he was just a killer post up threat, like walking mismatch in the post. Like there's nothing one defender can do to contest his shot. He's too big, he's too strong, too tall. And when you throw multiple defenders, you mentioned like a reliable hook shot, and it's really just away from there where you can go. And it's definitely interesting off of John Morant. I almost, as we're talking here, like think about like how the Jokic and Westbrook dynamic is working so well in Denver. Like maybe you get a little bit of that explosiveness off of his screen sometimes because he's such a strong screener that you would think giving John Morant just that little bit of extra space to work with off a strong screen could really work wonders to free him up in the half court. And they have other options for maybe full court possibilities as well. So you're obviously super high on Edey. What do you think maybe his ceiling is as a player? Like, would you say if everything goes right, he could be, I don't know, like, is he like, I think it's clearly like you think he can be a starter for Memphis for a long term career. And
Yeah,
like, is there much of a ceiling beyond that, I guess? Or do you think that's, in my eyes, it was more of like a matchup starter, but reliable role player that, can be a part of a rotation, but I didn't necessarily see all star coming or all defensive coming or something like that. And I was wondering where your head's at with the best case scenario.
yeah, I for sure see all-star upside. I think like if they ramp up that scoring a little bit, which I think he can while staying efficient, is like continues to be a positive. I mean, he really is like a historically good mover for a 7'4" player, right? Like his combine stats were like he blew him out of the water. So I don't see how he gets totally played off, like even situationally. I think like Will Hardy did an interesting job early in the season with like putting the five slot offense, I think it's called. Just like making him stay kind of like touching the perimeter and then like running back quickly to the hoop. But yeah, I think again if the shot like stays around, like I think he can, like 35% from three is not realistic for him. And then if you add in his like the floor is like 60% true shooting, right? Like and his offensive rebounding will get a lot of points there. I think he can like definitely be like a 20 plus point per game scorer while providing plus defense for a long time. I mean, it's really hard to adjust quickly especially as a big in the NBA. I mean, he's a little older, what, 22, 23. But like the fact that he's be able to do that at like a very high level, that's like, it should be very indicative of a high floor to begin with. And like the easiest way to have a high ceiling is to already have a high floor, and like just to be able to stay around and get those reps. So yeah, I'm super optimistic. I would have him too in this class, like with the bullet, this 2025.
Oh man, high praise, no doubt. There it is. I mean, hey, if you can score 20 and be a high impact defender and be a high impact rebounder and bring a little bit of that stretch game where you just have as few holes as possible in your game, and you can't really get picked on either side. I mean, no doubt that's the kind of ceiling that's pretty much bound to happen if you can do all those things right. So rooting for him and excited to see kind of how that potential plays out in Memphis. And I really do like the landing spot there, especially with the fit because of say how well Steven Adams fit there back in the day as maybe less skilled, but still like a similarly strong roll man, post up rim protector. You're playing next to a stretch four, stretch five, and Jaren Jackson, who can really do more of his scoring and two way versatility, help side defense, and then obviously Ja in the pick and roll, like creating those advantages and allowing Edey to be set up to convert them. So, are there any other bigs in this class that Alex Sarr or Kalel Ware, Donovan Clingan that you'd really like to hit on? Because we're obviously there's a lot of talented bigs coming in the league. I think all of them deserve a shout, and more so, like, do any of them? Like, I think Sarr was probably my I was probably highest on him in terms of like potential in this class. Like he brings those defensive instincts, the length, and obviously some defensive versatility, and then just had a little bit of enough skills to kind of carve out some potential, I suppose, in my mind. So, you know, do you is there anyone else that pops out to you?
Yeah, I mean, all those guys that you mentioned, I all had Lotto. I was a little lower on Sar. I think a lot lower. I had him 7, I think. I see he's like finishing at the rim better than I expected. Like he's at 73% of the rim. That was definitely like something I was a little concerned about because it was so poor at in the NBL. And like I was just really concerned with his like rebounding. Like it wasn't great. What was it? And it's looks like pretty decent now. It's more like again, it's like more like power forward rebounding. His blocking rate is like more like power forward block rate. So it's like I guess hard to see him being like full like center and power forward type role. I think that was I was definitely a little too harsh on him. I'd probably have him like 5 now. But yeah, I mean he's a cool player. He moves so well. Like I think the shot will be fine. I'm not too concerned about it. And he is shooting 47% from 2, which isn't great for a big. But yeah, I don't know. Are you still optimistic on him? Or?
Yeah, for sure. I think I really like his potential as a defensive ace type, and like you said, maybe more of a 4. I know we're kind of mixing some 4s and some fives in this conversation, and that's where bigs lie nowadays. There's a lot of versatility, and maybe sometimes in some lineups you are a 4, and I think the league has even reverted a little bit back to playing 2 bigs that can play together as long as there's enough two-way floor balance for both of them to be able to spread the floor a little bit, switch a little bit, guard a little bit, different positions. So, I can definitely see him playing a little bit more 4, and a lot of guys that a Jaren or a Cat or a Giannis or a Chet or a Mobley, they can all, like, we think of them as unicorny big, some of them, but they do spend a lot of time at the 4, and maybe you see more of a traditional 5 next to them as well. And like we hit on to start with, like the league is trending back towards size and skill and not just small ball, and that's one reason why. And SAR's got good potential to kind of be that guy for the Wizards, and at the very least, like a high impact defender and a play finisher that can spread the floor and maybe throw down some pick and rolls and bring some defensive versatility like that. And maybe we'll see if he develops into more on ball stuff, but I like him for those reasons, just as kind of a play finisher type as
Yeah.
well. And were there any other prospects from this draft that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't unfortunately been able to catch on to Khalil Ware's like recent surge. It seems like he's been playing really well, but like he's someone I definitely regret. I think I had him 12 would be top 10 for me now. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
he showed
mean,
a lot of skills.
he's like, I'm still really conflicted on him because like right, extremely skilled. I trust the shot like a lot. But and I trust the movement. I think he's like very athletic, but he just like the motor is like super inconsistent. The positioning was super inconsistent. In college to a point of how much can this guy really improve? You know, if that's not fully there, I did another piece this offseason on like the biggest improvers of all time, the players like Steve Nash, who went from like negative like 5 player to like obviously Hall of Famer. And like a commonality with all of them is like their motors were insane, right? Like every single player, like Russell Westbrook, Kyle Lowry, Ben Wallace, Gerald Wallace, those are the type of players that I was talking about. And like, as if you're searching for all-star upside, I don't know if Ware has it just because I haven't seen that level of like effort really, which I hate feeling like an old school scout, being like, oh, he doesn't try and he doesn't run hard enough. But like sometimes he kind of doesn't run hard enough, and like that won't like negate his like talent some, you know. So like I don't clip that because I still feel optimistic about him, you know. Like, I still think he's super talented. I need to watch those recent games to really like update my take on Ware.
Yeah, and that's fair. And yeah, when you're talking about the motor guys, that's kind of where I hope Jalen Suggs finds his trajectory because he's just got a crazy motor, crazy defense, and has slowly developed skills. So you hope to see that all around development come to fruition for some consistency, maybe like a Chauncey Billups type of late bloomer rise that just is a smart player out there and able to put it all together. Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com. So definitely some exciting bigs in that class, but I think we should hop right into this class, the 2025 NBA draft class. Super excited to see all the bigs there. Before we dive into the true bigs, you had a really interesting scouting report on Cooper Flagg, the hot name that is just, proving expectations wrong, even as the highly touted prospect. Like he's making a name for himself as, a lot of people are saying an all-time possible prospect on both ends. Like he's been, one of the best defensive prospects I've ever scouted, and he's been getting a lot of point guard reps for Duke now, where he's kind of putting some of the concerns to bed about some of the other things he does well. And I think what impressed me at Mount Verde the most offensively was his tough shot making, being able to like post up into a fadeaway or pump fake into a crossover into a midi pull up or a quick drive and kick out, and maybe hit the cutter on out of the post. Like, so some very, to me, like he made the right reads, and he's a quick processor. And it might be a little different than we've talked a little bit about, maybe different than some of like the greatest scoring creators you've ever seen with a Luka Doncic or LeBron James or Nikola Jokic. And I think he doesn't have to necessarily be that to be great. And at the very end of the day, like and I mean this as a compliment, like he's a maniac when it comes to basketball. Like he is always working, always improving. He has incredible instincts on both ends of the floor, great touch, great shooter. And like it wouldn't necessarily be surprising if he kept improving, because we have seen him on a growth curve that is rising up as he's been at Duke. And I think this piece does a great job of outlining what his weaknesses were and how he's literally getting reps on the weaknesses, and how that can really maybe set him up in the future to develop everything where he doesn't really have too many holes in his game for either side of the ball to pick on. So, when you were doing this scouting report, what really stood out to you about, Flagg's game, where he can help a team right away, and then maybe his best case scenario potential of what he can develop into one day?
Yeah. First of all, he was just like awesome to watch. Kind of the process I went through for this was, and what I'm gonna do for all my scouting reports is to start with the earliest tape and just like watch like a handful, like 2, 3, 4, as many as I need really for each level. Like mostly I feel like 2 or 3 is enough to like kind of get a gist of where their skill development is at. So I did that through his 15U Maine United days to Montfair sophomore junior season, his 16U Maine United, and his FIBA tape at 17U when he was 15 years old, finishing with Duke tape, obviously. I think to get an idea of his ceiling, watch that Notre Dame game, right? Where he put up 42
Yeah.
and shot 16 of 17 from the line, which is pretty crazy. Or like any of his recent games, really, you'll see the ceiling, you know? If you want to, I think the big turning point for me, like mentally, is like if you want to get a sense of his floor, of how high his floor is, watch the FIBA tape when he was, again, 15 years old, playing against 17 years old. Like, that's a huge gap at that age. And he was, if not the best, like probably the best player on the floor for the last game against Spain. I think his stat line was like insane. Hold up. But I think he had like 7 steals or something like that in that game. But anyways, the point being, Duke has like drastically evolved his type of looks that he's getting to be more on ball, more pick and roll oriented, as you said, kind of refining those weak points of his game. And he's adapted like pretty well, pretty quickly to something that's entirely new to him. Or not entirely, but like at this usage, at this competition level, at his age, is like pretty unprecedented to have that type of change in role. And like, I mean, you have to go to kind of like the Anthony Davises who just like transitioned from being like a guard to like a forward in no time. I think he's like in that rarity of a level, basically. If I mean, I wouldn't say it's generational just because we've had like Wemby, like we've seen what real generational can like look like. But kind of where I settled at my scouting report is I think he is upside to be a top 5 player in the league, and like his median outcome would probably be around like number 10 player in the league or something like that. Like I'm super optimistic on. So like the thing about the FIBA tape, just circling back around that, is they had all kinds of like talented like 17-year-olds, like players older than him that got all the on-ball reps, were doing all the scoring. He was just like the energy guy out there. He was the energy power forward basically, who played some small ball 5 too. And he just like cleaned up all the loose change. Like he just was he had like 7 or 8 steals, just all so active everywhere. He had like 4 blocks, I think. He was just everywhere, and just like clearly so physically talented that he can like teleport from one spot to the other. I think his straight line speed is kind of underrated, just like his acceleration and burst. This is why I really like him playing from the high post, because I think he can get to the rim in one dribble so quickly from there, while still like giving the option for that like short pull up. But yeah, if you look at the recent Duke tape, he's evolved a lot in being able to find a way to get short mid-range looks, when before he would kind of like settle for contested deep mid-range looks. So kind of combining with his like improving free throw rate, he's like knows how to use that. His craft as a scorer has evolved a lot. As you said, just like his use of like exaggerated pump fakes, like rip throughs, like his crossover has gotten a lot more fluid. It's really hard to like list all the ways he's improved, because it's like, again, like that motor is more than there, right? He's like kind of like a maniac a little bit. I'm kind of scared of him, but I put him as forward initiator. I was kind of like mixed on putting that role for him, because I think he would thrive as a lower usage role also. But I pulled also, as part of my research for this, I was looking at amount of like self-created looks among the jumbo creators that we've seen. I think I did like 6, 7 and up. You have to have like a certain assist of players that are 6, 7 and up that have a certain usage and assist rate. Cooper Flagg graded around the middle of the pack for like high draft picks, but I mean, he was just below Paolo and Tatum, and just above Ben Simmons and Brandon Miller as far as like how much he was creating. And this was like a few weeks ago before that recent surge too. So he's basically self-creating scoring at the same rate as Jason Tatum was, and he's taller and like younger than Jason Tatum. Like, I guess Tatum was pretty young as a freshman. I can't remember. But yeah, the ceiling, that's why I give him top 5 player ceiling. It's also like, I think a lesson I've learned from scouting is even when you're really high on a player, it's kind of hard to know where those talents are going to play out exactly. Like Dyson Daniels, I was super high on. I think he figures out offense a little bit. I know his defense can be really good. Instead, he's just become like one of the best defensive players in the league, right? Like, you just like, that's kind of the role he fit in, and that talent found his way to manifest itself, in that role, because like he's just a very talented, skilled person. I think Coop, doesn't matter where he's going to end up, he's going to find a role, right, that matches whatever they need him to do, just because he's like showing this versatility. Yeah, I think you can upgrade all those numbers in that graph too that you're showing, as far as pull up stuff too. No, yeah. But yeah, his, again, like I pulled his, like the number of looks that he got from low efficiency play types, which are like PNR ball handler, pick and roll ball handler, or the ball handler reps, running off screens, handoffs, and ISOs. That's been 42% of his possessions, which is a record high. His high efficiency looks, which are cuts, roll man, and putbacks, have only been 15% of his possessions, which is a record low for him. So he's taking really difficult, he's completely changed his profile, taking difficult looks, still providing tons of value on defense, while like figuring out how to provide value on offense. Like, there's few ways this guy can fail, is kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great way to put it. I think his scalability is what jumps out immediately as a prospect. Like you said, like you can basically ask him to do anything and he will be good to great at it. And like I think that two-way versatility, like I mentioned before, the defense jumps off the page. Like there's nothing he can't do defensively. I think he's one of the best big wing defenders that this game has seen and will see. It reminds me of like Kurlenko-esque in terms of just all the ways he can impact the game, force turnovers, block shots as a 4, steal the ball on the perimeter, use that length and mobility to just switch at least 1 through 4, and maybe, small 5s at the very least. We'll see how, post up defense, I guess, against an Embiid looks like, because we're just like, just looking for a flaw somewhere at this point, just in terms of that. But, the defense could not be more like set, in my opinion. And then the offense, like I mentioned before, I think it is super scalable, and I think the progress he's made on the ball at Duke has really been what jumped out to me as a creator in that sense, because at the very least, I think he would absolutely thrive playing off the ball next to any basically offensive engine like a Trae Young or a Luka Doncic or a Nikola Jokic. And obviously a lot of players would, but also there's a lot of scorers out there that might not want to be off the ball, might not cut and move like that. And these 3 graphs, just to hit on some of them, some of the games that I saw him with, this is some Cerebro impact stats, and he was one of the most impactful players at the 2023 Sunshine Classic, which was between some great high school teams, obviously his all-time team, and then Cameron Boozer and Jace Richardson and his brother Caden Boozer were all there in that game, and Darius Acuff and Donovan Freeman. Freeman actually really popped out with impact that weekend, but Flagg was really high there, where he was one of the best, like top 5 defender, top 5 in impact there. And his scoring creation was a little lower at that point at Mount Verde. And the same kind of trend was there at the 2024 Mount Verde Invitational Tournament, where, DeBonsa, this graph shows scoring going up and playmaking, passing going to the right, and then shooting. The brighter and bigger the circle, the better shooter they are. So DeBonsa here at the top right was kind of a standout offensive engine at this event, where the Mount Verde team went up against DeBonsa and Stokes and prolific prep at that point. And DeBonsa really stood out there. Derik Queen really stood out. Obviously not as a shooter, but really stood out as an effective scorer. Ryan Jones as well, and Dante Allen before he was on Mount Verde. This is before the transfer, stood out as well. And Cooper Flagg is obviously rated highly here, but not like jumping off the page in terms of scoring and creation at that event. But when you look at just impact, that's where he pops off the page. So on this other data viz here, you can see overall impact going up and defensive impact going to the right. And he's just, in a world of his own as a defender, as an impactful player in that tournament. And that kind of weighs everything that they do to fill up the box score to show who was the player that impacted winning the most. And some other projected top picks, Sabonsa and Stokes, are also up here. You can find Derik Queen, Asa Newell, Dante Allen, Liam McNeely, Aiden Sherrill, Ryan Jones, Tyler Johnson. We're also kind of higher up. Dwayne Aristode for that event. Elijah Crawford popped up. There's a lot of fun talent. Shauna Babe was pretty young back then, but a lot of fun talent at some of these events that I got to catch live and write the scouting reports on. So all that is to say that the development that he's shown as a scoring creator has really popped at Duke more than I was expecting and faster than I was expecting. And like his ability to basically address his weaknesses, as your outline or as your article outlines, where his least efficient plays are the ones he's running the most, and yet he's slowly getting better at them. And then he pops for that 40-point game, creating looks for himself and his teammates. And it makes one think that maybe he could be, at the very least, a top scoring option on a good team or a great team. And he doesn't necessarily, what I think my holdup was, can he be the one that also creates looks for everyone else when he's everywhere defensively, scoring everywhere? Can he basically be LeBron James? is like where that conversation like ends up, and that's a big leap to make for a guy. And that's why I think his scalability and his versatility just make him a high impact player in any role. And so that brings me, like you said, he has such a high floor where he'll be a good basketball player in any role that you ask him to be. And there's probably a good projection to make that adding up the sum of his skills will create an even better player. And maybe it's in the way that Franz Wagner was viewed as like a high floor player with a limited ceiling because he was already good at so many things, when in actuality that has led to a 6'10" pick and roll maestro, ball handler, foul drawing Peyton Spray forward who can create his own looks at the rim, has the vision to kick out for three. It hits the lob to Wendell Carter with the Wagner Carter connection there, and Wagner Carter, I should say, as Magic fans have dubbed it. That's just how Franz thrives. And I think it might have been, shout out to Grib on Twitter, I think he was the one that compared Flagg to some sort of mix of Franz and Anthony Davis, and somewhere in between is the impact that you could end up seeing. And I really like that comparison, where like he's clearly a defensive anchor. He's probably a one-man defense level impact defender. He's a super strong play finisher. He brings versatile scoring. I think the shooting, plenty of indicators to show the shooting will be there, especially off ball. And he's shown enough to think that he can run some pick and rolls. He can create a good look for himself and others. And at the very least, find the open man, process the game, and make the right read. And basically answer that question of, can he make the best decision for the team every time down? And I think he's shown time and time again that he has. So it's much more realistic, at least for me, who had some worries about that scoring creation, to believe that, this guy really can be a consistent decision maker, creator. And he's shown that at Duke. And I think that's really what has stood out to me about him.
Yeah, my comp for Flagg, which Grib has also mentioned, is Brianna Stewart, actually, just because I'm a Liberty fan too, so it's top of mind.
There it is.
But who, like, if you think about her profile, she not efficient, like 2-point pull-up shooter. I mean, like, but very efficient for position. Non-efficient 3-point shooter, but efficient for position. And crazy defensive talent who's getting all kinds of stocks left and right. Coop doesn't have her like same wingspan. At like 7'2", I think she has. But he's able. His like vertical talent is so impressive. He's able to get to the rim in like an instant. That really makes him a crazy shot blocker. And again, the acceleration gets him those steals. But yeah, Brianna Stewart, never a super efficient scorer, but could take on that volume, could scale up, and she's going to finish a top 3 WNBA player of all time, right? So like, it's okay if you have if he's never perfectly efficient as a pull up scorer, right? And it's okay if he's just like slightly, if he's a good forward initiator, but maybe not a good like guard level initiator, he can still reach all time levels with his level of defense. Because I would be surprised if he's not a top 5 defender at his peak.
Yeah, I mean his floor feels like a perennial all defensive candidate. Like it's like only one of those things where only injuries are going to keep him off of like 5 all defensive teams over the next like 10 or 15 years. So it's really the like I guess we just maybe focus on the unknown part, the potential part. What else can improve? And when you're good at so many things, we're comparing against literally superstars of the game. It's easy to like start nitpicking skills and try to come up with things of can he be consistent at the highest level of basketball at this, especially when we're comparing him to like top 20 top 30 guys of all time. So that's a high bar to meet, but defensively he's got it. Like he's going to make some team very happy this draft. And I almost like I've been saying I wanted him to be more of like next to a star scorer that forced him to be second. But now I almost just want to see him like unleash him with touches, let him run a whole bunch of pick and rolls a game, and just see what he can do. Let's see what this really fully develops into, because he's clearly a special prospect. So it's interesting. You mentioned that you would have Zach Edey over everyone else in this class. I'm guessing after Flagg. Yeah. So that being said, there's a lot of interesting bigs in this class, and I'd love to dive into the 2 other Mount Verde front court guys, Asa Newell and Derik Queen. We're both high on both. I think I prefer Newell for a lot of reasons that I just see a winning basketball player when I see him play, and you and some other others in scouting circles have kind of really opened my eyes to Derik Queen's potential. And I don't have it in front of me, but you made a really cool graph I can pull up while we're talking here about his ability to get shots at the rim and draw fouls, where Zion was at the top of that list, and it was actually a very similar usage rate and foul drawing rate. And that's really the comp that opened my eyes of maybe not Duke Zion flying out of the gates and throwing down poster slams, but Pelican Zion, who's at his peak was 20, or still is when he's healthy, 27, 28 points a game, drawing 7 or 8 fouls a game, getting to the rim with ease, beating people off the ball. And Queen's shown some interesting passing vision that I don't know if he's always necessarily had the opportunity to be. And I think one thing that kept me a little lower on Queen at first was probably his setting at Mount Verde, where he's surrounded with all this other talent. I kind of just wanted to see him do big man things and do them well. And he probably wants to play point center and run the show and try to like bring the ball up, go throw in a Euro step, show all the skills that he has. And it's kind of a give and take between, all that talent that's there, the role that he probably should be playing according to maybe his coaches, and to bring that floor balance, and what he wants to do on the court and wants to show on the court. And so, he would have a play or two where maybe he would try to Euro step through 3 defenders because he thought he could, or he would throw a pass that isn't quite perfect. To me, it was almost like watching Jameis Winston play football, where he's good for like it's highlight. It's watching a guy make highlight after highlight, but you're good for about 1 or 2 questionable decisions per game is the comparison there. So, before I dig more into maybe the comparison, what's really stood out to you about Queen and Newell?
Yeah, yeah. Just to circle back to the stat I was talking about, Cooper Flagg, about his
Oh, yeah.
self-creation points per 100. He was between Paolo and Ben Simmons there. So Derik Queen is higher up on the list. Queen's creating 15 points per 100 possessions, just himself, not being assisted. That's mostly coming at the rim. He's only second to Zion Williamson among these jumbo creators as far as creating rim points, and and third to Zion and Cade as far as total self creation goes. So he's like,
Oh, we're talking about the same data viz. So that's
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
gonna pull up here as well while you're talking.
yeah. So like that is like pretty astounding on from my viewpoint. He's like, his handle is so much better than I expected. Just watching him on fair, because he's mostly doing post up things, like low post things. But he's driving a ton, and he's like hardly ever turning it over on the drives. He's like drawing fouls at like a crazy high rate, and never turning it over as he drives the basket on good drive volume, which is like, it's kind of shocking for me. Um, so I think, yeah, the passing stands out too. I think my big hang up with him is like kind of an obvious one, that he's like a really old freshman. He's like already 20, maybe like what, 20 and a half, something like that, by draft day. So when you're talking about his playmaking and his outside shot, I'm a little more pessimistic on that than like most true like 18, 19-year-old freshmen would be. Um, but I think his passing vision is really impressive. I should say his passing manipulation, I think especially, is really impressive. Where he's able to kind of look guys off. He's super patient, kind of going through rotations, but he is a little more, I should say, like maybe a lot more turnover prone than I would want to be. He has an 18% turnover rate compared to 13% assist rate. I was looking at the numbers. He turns it over a ton in transition, particularly like a third of the time of his transition possessions he's turned it over, which I think I've seen comparisons to like DeMarcus Cousins with him, and some to like a mini Jokic. I am guilty of that too. He has some Jokic's qualities to him, as his like passing manipulation and ball handling at size, because he really, it's not like he's getting low and like dribbling through traffic and stuff like that. He's dribbling at his waist and doing so really accurately as he's like spinning through traffic, just like perfectly placing the ball. I think a lot of times he just gets over exuberant with his drives, and that he's kind of we're going to keep going, we're going to find a way to the basket, and he kind of like drew a few charges that way. Can have a few like lazy passes here and there. I think the motor is something that's still a bit of a question for me. It's hard to tell in the college setting always, like a player's motor, but I mean, he's rebounding the hell out of the ball on both ends of the court. Still blocking some like a power forward's amount of shots, I should say. Still getting a decent number of steals. He's not. I think he could, maybe there's upside for him to draw more fouls. He's at a 45 free throw rate, like giving his size and how good his handle is, he might be able to like figure out grifting a little bit better, I think. But yeah, he's such a fun player to watch. I really enjoy his game in general, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some really impressive traits. Some of those numbers could make sense with a little higher on the turnover, because I think he can be a high risk taker, but that's also what some of the best passers do at different points in their career, and like they take risks. And just because you have a high assist to turnover ratio, that might be, that might prove you're a safe decision maker, but it might not necessarily mean directly translate to effective passing or superstar passing, where sometimes it's role players that have the highest assist to turnover ratio, but that just kind of means you're making a smart decision. You're not taking the risk to rack up more assists or set up your teammates. you're just kind of doing the safe thing, which like there's pros and cons to both, I think, and it depends on your role and what the coach asks you to do and what kind of player you are. Like Trey Young is going to try some tough passes because he can. Jokic is going to try some tough passes because he can. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to lead the league in assist to turnover ratio, and yet they're still thought of some of the best as some of the best passers in the league for good reason because they make some of the best passes and they create the advantages for their teammates by trying those tough shots to try to set them up for the best in the best position to succeed as scorers. And yeah, this data viz really is great for a lot of reasons. It something about it really helps visualize some of the usage that Queen brings, some of the similarities to Zion that we hit on, like the shots at the rim, the mid range, and ideally him hunting for contact the way Zion does to draw those fouls and increase the free throws as well. And there's also we'll probably hit on Sorber a little later, but it's nice to see he made that graph as well with high usage, high assist rate, fits the height threshold and the age threshold for among freshmen, and it's impressive to see him there as well. But in terms of Queen, and versus like Asa Newell, like I was saying before, like I view them similarly now in that I think the team that is up on the big board is as important in the decision process of who should maybe get picked first, because I think like a team that doesn't necessarily have a clear star in place, like there's a good reason to gamble on star upside, and I think Derik Queen kind of does have that edge for that, where if you're looking for an offensive hub, a big man down low that can score at the rim, can create paint penetration with downhill drives, score, hopefully draw fouls a little more, but also look to create for his team, be like a handoff hub, a grab and go playmaker in the front court, like an offensive engine. I think that's a guy that is worth a gamble on to see what he has. Whereas maybe if a team is drafting super high in the lottery, maybe they already have a star or two in place and they're trying to find winning players that can help them impact the game right away on both ends. That's where I think Asa Newell stands out to me with his defensive versatility, his play finishing, his rim rolling, his active hands. Like when I saw both of them live with Cooper Flagg, it was really Newell's defense that popped out to me immediately, thinking like, well, he's really everywhere too. Like imagine trying to score against Flagg and Newell and Queen as a high schooler. Like it's a lot to ask because Newell is just everywhere. Like he brings that high motor that we talk about, and I think there's enough there as kind of a more of a 4 and maybe a small 5 in some lineups, but I see him more as a big wing that on defense at the 4, but he kind of brings some play finishing traits that are more traditional for the 5. So maybe it's a little bit of a comp to an Aaron Gordon or a Brandon Clark type, or maybe even a Tari Eason type, where you get defensive impact, versatility, long arms, active hands, brings a lot to the front court as a defender, and then a really strong play finisher. Like he impressed with his footwork in the paint, on the post ups, couple moves down low that look like good fundamentals with the footwork and finishing near the rim. And at Georgia, I think he's shown a little bit more with the ball in his hands, not necessarily creating, but attacking closeouts. Like I think he's hit the pick and pops. He's hit some catch and shoot threes now. He has some good shooting indicators throughout his career for that. And so if he can develop a reliable catch and shoot 3-point shot, he can threaten the pick and pop, whether it's out of a normal pick and roll or a double drag or a horns, and he's the one popping. And then also, to me, he's shown a pretty solid handle to at least attack a closeout. Maybe not to run the entire offense, but to at least shoot, pump fake and dribble drive, and keep his head up for either a quick kick out to keep the ball moving or attack the rim strongly. And he's also, like, I don't know if it's sneaky or not, but super effective rebounding the ball, like in traffic. He's always a part of the play. He's always fighting for the rebound on the glass, it could be 1-on-3, and he comes down with the rebound and then draws a foul trying to put it back up, has a quick second jump. So I think there's just a lot to like two-way impact wise, where he can dribble a little bit, shoot a little bit, ideally pass a little bit, probably better than he has in terms of just seeing the whole floor, but at least keep the ball moving in that sense. And then the defense jumps off the page to me. So that if there's like the Grizzlies are too good now, but maybe the Hawks like fall into the lottery, and they're looking to beef up their front court with a win now player rather than hand the ball. They have Trae Young in place, so rather than hand the ball to a rookie as they're trying to build like a playoff team. I don't know. You could kind of make the case for either side, but I kind of like Newell's high floor for some scenarios versus Queen's potential for other scenarios. And I was wondering, what else maybe stood out to you about Asa Newell and where you land on them?
Yeah, I watched a decent amount just with the Flag Montverde tape. I admit I'm a little lower on Asa. Um, I guess I'm kind of just like personally I'm very I'm very tilted towards like bigs who can pass. And I'm like that's a big question mark for me with Asa. I'm not like outlawing it by any means, but I would just like to see that number a little higher. I think his reads are like fine. His like technique is fine, but maybe it's an opportunity thing of getting more like short roll reps or something. But I also think he's a good athlete, but maybe not a nuclear one. I'm kind of curious your thoughts there. I do trust him. I mean, he's clearly an NBA athlete, right? I agree with you on like the floor being pretty sound there. So like maybe I'm underestimating the upside a little bit. But yeah, I guess my big thing is like the defensive rebounding numbers are weirdly like way lower than the offense. Like he almost gets more offensive rebounds than defensive, which is kind of strange. I think he does actually. So I'm kind of just curious why you think his defensive rebounding numbers aren't as good.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just him guarding a little more out in the perimeter, but like he's obviously great at crashing the glass on offense. That takes more physical skills to get an offensive rebound than a defensive one. So I'm like tilting towards optimistic there. But just among the skilled bigs that we're talking about, I would prefer someone with like more passing in general, I would say. But I do think he's taking the catch and shoot threes. He's making the open ones, at a pretty. He's sorry, siren. 38% on an open catch and three looks, which is like really good, especially for a big. So I could be underestimating the passing. I could be underestimating the athleticism or the shooting, but I'm kind of like I can't really get there. With him. So I'm kind of curious where you think I might be off here.
Yeah, and I think some of those are real concerns. Like I'd say the passing is probably one of his bigger weaknesses, or at least something he doesn't necessarily show a lot of. Like he does tend to, if he's going to attack a closeout, he's going to shoot the catch and shoot three, or he's going to pump fake and drive to the rim. And yeah, in terms of the rebounding, he definitely is very active on the offensive glass, and you can see him like fighting in traffic for boards, for putbacks, and it's interesting. And that's a good note that maybe he is guarding more on the perimeter, because you'll see him doing a lot of shot contests out at the 3-point line, and that's partially where I end up. That I view him more as a four that defensively that does 5-man things offensively, if that makes sense. So maybe it would work a little better if he's paired maybe with a stretch 5 type big man alongside him. But those are fair concerns, and it's understandable if you prioritize passing big men that you might be a little more interested in some other players in the draft, because there's definitely plenty of good passers to look at. And just for reference, he rates really good off the ball as a play finisher. Like he's 80th percentile via synergy on cuts. He's 76th percentile on the putbacks that we mentioned on the offensive rebounds. He's 97th percentile in transition, 1.6 points per game, and he's 84th percentile on spot ups, where all of those numbers are over 1 points per possession and rate pretty well. And that's kind of where I think his ideal role ends up kind of probably off ball, probably the pick and pop threat that can shoot the three, attack the closeout, maybe post up a mismatch after attacking that closeout. And he's looking to score or finish strong at the rim on rim rolls. He's not necessarily looking to kick. And I think, if you end up kind of like we've seen with Michael Porter, where like if you end up playing next to a great passer, you might realize the ball might find you again, and you start making more team first plays to keep the ball moving in that sense. So that's kind of where the ideal projection would be. But it is fair to be concerned about. Like I don't think teams should necessarily draft him to be their future star, Paul George on ball scorer creator type. Like that's not really where the upside is to me, as much as just a really good two-way basketball player that's going to help any team he's on make winning plays and kind of impact near the rim. Do just everything I mentioned. Just do a lot of different things well with the ball. But it's fair to like other guys in this draft, because I mean there's a lot of interesting big man talent. You mentioned you saw Thomas Sorber live. Where was what game was this?
That was an MSG against St. John's this past Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah, that was awesome. A lot of fun. Unfortunately, he had I think he had a little bit of foul trouble and had to go to the locker room briefly for an injury. So, but he still played 32 minutes. It was still fine. But yeah, it was really cool. Really, he's a fun player. I'm super high on him as well. Obviously, like I like my big passers, and he's a really good passer. My big takeaway seeing him live was I think he's listed at 245, but he probably plays like 20 pounds above that, if not more. He's like just so strong. He had his opponent like in hell, just like throwing elbows at him. He's like borderline kind of a dirty player. I was like, did I see you like put your foot out there a little bit trying to trip some guy? I'm not sure. But like the point being, he's super physical. He knows how old is he? He's either 18 or recently 19. He's super young. I think he's recently 19. And already like passing super well, like higher assist rate than Derik Queen has. At over a year younger, I think. Rebounding the hell out of the ball, getting more blocks, getting a lot of blocks, like really good hand-eye coordination, moves well, sets amazing screens, has some like maybe will he shoot like some energy. He's good in the mid-range, 38% in the mid-range. Good in the free throws, 74% on free throws. The form looks pretty solid to me, like pretty fluid, only like a slight hitch, but he's squared up. He's like what you want as far as like his free throw form goes. But yeah, he's a guy that just keeps the ball moving too, right? He's like somewhat creative. I think he'd be a really, really good high-low passer. My comp for him is actually kind of a more dynamic version of Al Horford. So I'm like, again, I'm super high on him. I think his IQ, like his feel for the game, his processing is, I think, super high. Again, I see that mostly in how he uses physicality, just like either he had so many mismatches that Georgetown's poor entry passers just could not find him on, where he had this guy like completely under the rim, just like throwing his ass into him, throwing his like elbows, like just like he's right under the rim and they couldn't get the ball to him. So like I think he'll be really good at punishing mismatches inside, even if like Al Horford, he's not a very good vertical athlete. He has 15 dunks, so it's just a little under one a game at 6'11", 6'10". So it's not nothing, but he's not very explosive by any means. But he's a pretty good mover, like good laterally. He can switch some. Again, yeah, that's my like closest comp in this class, I think, is like Al Horford for Sorber. So I think I'm super high on him.
Yeah, I caught his game against UConn the other day, and the first thing that stood out was his hands, like just really good hands. Like if there's a loose ball, he'll pick it up off the ground and just lay it into the rim without freaking out or overreacting or something, or like losing his footing. And the Horford comp works in a lot of ways because he does a lot of things well, and like a smart player clearly. Like can time up a screen, can set a good strong screen, can slip the screen, can slip into like a post up situation. And the vision is another thing that popped out. Like normally, as soon as he draws a double, and maybe even he tries to score through it and doesn't score, but he has the ball still, he'll find the open teammate. Like he often was hitting a cutter or hitting an open shooter in the corner out of the post. And he brings some good fundamentals. I want to say Synergy has him as efficient on cuts and spot ups, and then even better on post ups and putbacks. So good near the rim, good off ball play finisher type, active rebounder, runs the floor really hard, like makes some nice cuts himself, and then his defensive instincts like just also stand out. Like he'll make strong blocks. He has a quick second jump to like time up a block if maybe he was going for the rebound and landed, but he quickly gets back up. And I think one play he like beat the scorer into the air and was like waiting in the air to like just swat it down from behind. Just really active hands on both ends, get some deflections without fouling on the ball. That's impressive. So I can definitely see, why you're so high on him. And it's understandable. And just off the top of your head, how many bigs do you think could go in the lottery? We've got, I guess Cooper Flagg's more of a wing. We'll count Asa Newell for this conversation. You got Queen, Newell, Sorber. There's Colin Murray-Boyles, Janai. I always mess up his name. Janai Broom.
Yeah.
Noah Penda, Maluak.
Yeah. I think Flagg will be one. You think there's a chance Flagg doesn't go one, by the way?
I think that's just bucket getter talk on Twitter that are like Dylan Harper deserves to be loved without necessarily being a shot at Flagg. Like I don't really see many or any teams talking them out of Flagg at this point. It's going to be really hard to not take that guy that just does so many things well. But if you want a guard, like Dylan Harper does a lot of things well too. So it's not like you'd be getting a bad player. There just might be a more impactful one that you're leaving on the board.
Yeah, we've seen crazier things happen at the draft though before. You never know.
I mean, Luka fell to 3. Jordan fell to 3. Like these things happen.
Yeah, you never know. But Flagg will be in it. I would guess Malawach ends in it in the lotto. I'm not sure about Sorber. I'm not sure about Broom. I'm not sure about Boyles. Queen is being mocked still in the 20s, I think.
Yeah, that part's kind of wild as compared to where like a lot of our mutual scouting friends seem to be so high on him. Like that's a big leap, and it definitely seems like a draft where I mentioned before with Lucas the other day. Like there's guys that a team could talk themselves into taking them at 3, and there's also those same guys could drop all the way to like 20, and it's crazy how big that range of outcomes is, and how the late risers and the players that do well in the college scene could really jump up. Rasheer Fleming has popped out, Thoreau, Danny Wolf for Michigan. Like there's a lot of interesting bigs that the wave of skilled big men is coming, and we're here. So there's you could honestly talk me into all of those guys being first round picks, and I think personally, I'd have a good 5 or 6 of them in my lottery big board. So like I could definitely see that as well, and and we could kind of maybe end the pod with a quick little draft exercise of maybe we just, if you're prepared for this, to kind of take turns draft style of, basically if all we could do was draft these big men, the names we've mentioned, what order would we take them if we were, just trying to build a team, and you can do it based on potential, based on two-way impact, whatever you want, really. Like you can go first, and we can count Cooper Flagg if you want, or just, we've hit on him already. Let's say Flagg's already been taken. So, in this mock draft here. So between Asa Newell, Derik Queen, Thomas Sorber, Colin Murray-Boyles, Janai Broom, Noah Penda, Maluak, Fleming, Wolf, Thoreau, you know, who would you take out of these big men? And, some of them obviously could end up in the second round, and some of them could be top 5 picks by the time it's all said and done. So things can change, but, as of January 17th, middle of January, where would you have some of these guys? Who would you take out of this group?
Yeah. Yeah, I would take Flagg one.
Yeah.
Just to give you an indication, by the way, of what I think about this class, I have Flagg. I have numbers for all my rankings, whatever. So the difference between Flagg and Dylan Harper at number 2 for me is the same as the difference between Dylan Harper and number 20. So I'm very high on Flagg. I've gotten lower on the number 2 spot in general, but I also think this is just a very flat draft from 2 to 20. So I think a lot of these guys can sneak their way in, sneak their way up. I think it's going to be very, very team dependent on positionally. You have a lot of high field bigs, but yeah, just to answer your question, I would take Derik Queen as the next pick. Yeah.
All right, and probably for his upside, I would say of the things you hit on.
Yeah, just the jumbo initiator upside of if he's something that really sticks with me. He's really, really good off stampede cuts, just catching the ball all on the move already, and just finding a way to the rim. That negates a lot of the catch and shoot 3-point stretching that you need to do if you already have to be guarded while you're catching the ball, right? So that kind of effectively extends his 3-point gravity to a certain degree, opens up those driving lanes in a different way. I think his driving upside is super. Again, looking at this graph, I buy the initiator upside to some extent. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great point of him in motion, and that's another parallel to Zion, I think, where you get this guy in motion, he's a tank. No one wants to get in front of him. It doesn't look like he should be able to dribble to the rim, but he just does over and over again. And he's not breaking somebody down with mad crossover dribbles to create an advantage. He's just already on the move. And however big he is, no one's getting in front of him, and he's just getting to the rim with ease. And he's able to do it at his own pace. He's able to find teammates if the shot isn't there. And you hope to see a couple of these things round out, and with free throw drawing fouls and maybe the 3-point shot and all that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of upside, I totally can see that being the right pick. And for now, I'm still all in on Asa Newell, especially for his floor. I'll go with Newell with the next pick. I just think he's gonna bring a high impact 2-way player to just about any team that he ends up on. And, maybe you can talk yourself into the potential of some of these other guys, and it's very reasonable. But, Newell does a lot of things right that I like to see in a player. So I'll check his synergy while we're talking here. He's highly, I hit on some of his strengths before, but he's also 0.86 points per possession as a pick and roll man, which can improve, and 0.87 points per possession on post ups, which can also improve. They're a little bit low usage, but he normally finds himself scoring very good to excellent off the ball on cuts, putbacks, transitions, spot ups. He might not be the next great star of this draft, but I think he's going to be a very good player. He has all defensive upside, in my opinion, because of everything he does so well, that versatility. And you combine versatility with a handful of developable ball skills and clear traits that translate directly to the league, being able to attack a closeout, hit the open three, finish strong at the rim, be active on the glass, versatile defense 3 through 5. I think there's a lot to like there for a 2-way impact player that not quite Cooper Flagg scalable, but someone that whose skills translate to the league and just about will help any team be a winning team. So I'll take him next. And with the third pick, who you got?
Even though this player has been super frustrating this year, I would take Colin Murray-Boyles.
All right.
Out of South Carolina. I was expecting a playmaking leap because he was one of the youngest players in the NCAA last year and was like crazy productive. Just like did a little bit of everything, even though he's undersized, big, basically at 6'7". His rim finishing is incredible. His like touch. I did a comparison of the non-shooting or the like borderline shooting prospects of Derik Queen, Asa Newell, Colin Murray-Boyles, Thomas Sorber, and Janai Broome. And Boyles like was pretty dominant as far as touch on hooks and runners. His touch is really was the best of that group. And his touch on layups was the best of that group. Yeah, you can search for shooting or will they shoot if you want.
Oh yeah, I know the one. I remember the post. I also forgot you can see me search here, but will they shoot?
Will they shoot?
Yeah, hey, there we go.
And a lot of commentary there. So for Boyles, I really trust his touch. I think if you're going to bet on someone to like stretch out to 3-pointer range, take the guy who's shooting like a crazy high percentage on like hooks, which are touch shots, and layups, which are touch shots also. Like maybe there's something there. His free throw percentage has been okay at like 68%. But he's so strong. I said in a group chat, he reminds me of Corliss Williamson when he drives, because he's like, people just bounce off of him. He gets so like low. His center balance gets so low. The turnovers have been an issue this year that I'm like pretty concerned about, but still like not bad enough to keep him out of my top 5. Because he's such a good defender. He moves, he covers a lot of grounds. His hand-eye coordination. I think the top 3 players in hand-eye coordination this year are like historically good at hand-eye coordination, being Cooper Flagg, Colin Murray-Boyles, and Noah Penda, playing in France. I think all 3 are going to be like all defensive level candidates. I don't think Newell's that far off either. His hand-eye is really good too. There's a lot of just like very skilled bigs in this class in general who have good hand-eye coordination and passing and like some skill. But yeah, Boyles, I mean, he took it to Janai Broome the other day and then turned around and had an awful game the day after, or the game after. So it's been a little inconsistent. I think the assist rate is still good, but the turnover rate's been too bad. Just he's been a little sloppy, just like forcing things a little bit. So I'm still confident that, I mean, he's still young. He's still 19, and playing a huge role for South Carolina, where they're like really relying on him to do a lot of things. So I think if you strip down his role a little bit in the NBA and like let him make quick decisions and just like attack the basket and like use that hook, use that like layup touch, he's going to be like, I think he'd be a really good scorer while also greasing the wheels of an offense with his passing and being your best defender, really. So yeah, that's my Boyles pitch.
Yeah, I mean, good pick there. And that was the game I actually caught recently of him, was Auburn versus South Carolina. And yeah, I mean, I thought he was super impressive getting to the rim, going downhill, whether it was like a stampede or whether it was off a screen. Like good footwork, good dribbler, could finish at the rim strong. Like you mentioned, just kind of took it to Broome over and over. Like he had a tough post up through contact, some nice acceleration burst into the soft finish at the rim, made some nice hustle plays, taking a charge, which it's nice to see big men still do that as well with the charges. You don't always see someone willing to just take one, but active energy defender on the glass. Just you can feel him out there. He's kind of everywhere, and yeah, like I mentioned, just getting to the rack at will, like drives, stampedes, off screens, faking a handoff into the drive, like and some good little ball skills too, like a little hook shot, a little crossover, and not something you always see out of a big. So I like that pick there. That's a nice one. I'll probably go with Kaman Maluak next. I would say he at first the first time I caught him play really impressed me was his defensive instincts, his ability to just be a good old traditional rim protector down low. And the more I've watched him and the more others have kind of pointed out to me is that his touch indicators are really good on the other end too. He's literally might be the best pick and roll man in college basketball. He rates in the 99th percentile. He scores 1.8 points per possession on just 26 opportunities, but you play with what you get, and he's just he's really thrived in three categories: putbacks, cuts, and then pick and rolls, where he's the big man roll man. And he's in the 89th percentile on cuts, 79th percentile on putbacks, like active down there. That shows some of his touch near the rim. And so you even mentioned that, the touch could also be an indicator for a 3-point shot down the road as well. So if you have a clearly definable role on both ends where you can protect the rim, be an instinctual defender on that end, and then turn around and finish strong on the other end. You can threaten a pick and pop, threaten the pick and roll. You have the vertical gravity as a roll man, and also active on the glass near the rim, just strong play finisher. I think there's a clear high floor for that, and then we'll see how far that touch can kind of be that swing skill for the upside as well, and what he can become as an offensive weapon. But at the very least, you have a high end, high impact 2-way rim roller, rim protector, ready made. You can drop on just about any pick and roll squad and expect high impact on both ends. So Maluak has really impressed this season, and obviously did so as well overseas on the Sudan team, where they really took it to Team USA in a close game that they almost pulled out against just a bunch of all stars, and they almost beat them after the not so fun fact that they didn't even have an inside basketball court in a gym like 5 years ago, and now they're battling Team USA in international play and putting up a good fight. So shout out to him. Some really talented bigs that have a ton of skills, and that's where the league is headed. So I think we've hit on some guys that could very well go in the lottery, and then there's a few more that could go as high as the lottery and might not get their name called to the second round, and that's how wide of a range of these outcomes are. So who would you take next among some of these names we've hit on?
Yeah, just to talk about Malawach a little bit, I mean, I would have him next for sure. I was going back and forth between him and Boyles. But fun fact, out of all first round draft picks since 2008, only 5 players have had a true shooting rating, a true shooting percentage above 70%. That's Jackson Hayes, Mark Williams, Udona Azubuike, Zach Collins, and Zion Williamson. None of them had above 75% true shooting. Not a single player drafted in the first round has had that. Malawach has an 80% true shooting rate. Just like unbelievably efficient. He's shooting 77% from the free throw line while shooting 86% from the rim. Like, he's one of the best lob threats we've seen, and he might be like a 40% 3-point shooter, right? Like, that's not off the table because he's relatively new to basketball too. His like development curve seems like pretty healthy. Like, his positioning's like improved, seems like, over the past year. I think his potential is like sky high. But for my next pick, I would take Janai Broom on this list. Or no, sorry, I'll take Thomas Sorber.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's who I thought you were going to go with.
Yeah, Sorber I have 7, Broom I have 9. So I'm like very high on both. But yeah, we've talked about Sorber some. I'm high on him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a good pick. We did hit on Sorber already. It's cool that you got to see him in person. I was wondering if there's anything that we skipped over that you might have noticed in person that you might not catch on tape.
That's a good question. It's really just like, I think like the attitude towards the game is kind of something you pick up in person. Just like how much they're jawing at people, how much they're like calling out their teammates to like what's happening, like just communicating. And he's just like, this kid, I mean, again, I feel like I've turned into like 20% old school scout a little bit of like, he just like loves the game, but he just like, he plays hard. Like, to be a big improver over your career, you have to like play hard, love the game of basketball to some degree. He like, that like oozes off the page with him. Right. So yeah, that's kind of like a nebulous answer, but like, I just like his approach to the game in general. I mean, the stats are the stats, which like show he's a really good player. He needs to play a little more against high level competition to like, for me to really solidify a top 8 case, but I don't see any reason against it right now.
Yeah, that's all fair. And yeah, I like that note that, actually being able to hear them talk as communicators is something that's pretty underrated for being there at live So obviously seeing how they interact with teammates, seeing if the whole team is excited when they do something well or doesn't really care, or seeing how they lift up teammates after a bad play, seeing if guys are, positive, if they're negative about not getting the ball, and just even on the court, like calling out plays, calling out defenses, calling the play like before it happens, like those are things that you just can't get if you're not in the building. So I think it's always nice to ideally get a little bit of both when you're doing the scouting process, and obviously easier said than done when it comes to international prospects and guys around the world and all the different points. But the more data points, the better, and more different experiences you have watching these guys, it really stands out. So back to the 2025 big man only NBA draft. You mentioned Janai Broom. I'm also was leaning maybe Noah Penda here, but I'm going to go with Broom just because I don't know. I like his scoring versatility. I think is what it is. Like I was looking at, maybe a little bit more upside there for everything. While I still really like Penda's, high floor. So with Broom, like jump into his synergy, like he scores over a point per possession on like I don't know 5 different play types. Like his his let's see here, his seventh most frequent play is ISOs, but he scores 1.2 on those, 94th percentile. 26 transitions, he scores 1.3 points per possession, 86th percentile. Pick and roll man 29 times, 1.2 points per possession, 71st percentile. And putbacks 1.38 point per possession, 83rd percentile. On cuts 1.5, 88th percentile, and a little bit lower on post ups and spot ups, but still zero point 0.8 point per possession on both of those. So you can kind of see that maybe he'll bring a little bit of do everything scoring versatility wise when it comes to what he can do at the next level. It's nice to see guys that can kind of put the ball through the net in different ways, and maybe they don't have one outlier NBA clear skill, but they're kind of good at everything, and that's where you hope that some of its parts effect kind of comes into play there, where when you don't really have a hole in your game, you can beat defenses in so many different ways that that just kind of adds up into a good basketball player, especially on the offensive end, on that side of things. And yeah, he got hurt in that matchup against Kyler Murray-Boyles, and I wouldn't say he was playing that great to begin with. But that was just one game. He's I think pretty recently, just before that, he popped off. Now I'm forgetting which game it was, but for like 30 points, and he has the big games, and they're college kids still. Obviously, it's really only superstars in the NBA that are going to be consistently great on a night to night basis. So, outside of those guys, you're going to have ups and downs, especially when like 3-point shooting is involved there. But I'll go with Broom here, and just any other thoughts on him. He's obviously also on this graphic. So where are you looking at for him?
No, I love Broom. He's been like a favorite of mine for a few years now. I wrote about him one of my first Stepien pieces a little bit. But he's like, yeah, he had an awful game against Murray-Boyles before he got hurt, but that's so rare for him to have a bad game. He's like pretty easily the best player in college basketball right now, and like that's the best player in college basketball who's also 6'10", can move pretty well and has some like touch. And I think you were really savvy talking about his scoring. I think people underrate that a lot, and that with his handle, his like passing ability, you have to kind of like you have to guard him straight up, right? And he can take you to the rim. So I think he has some scoring upside there, not just like a hard-nosed defender or like interior scorer. Like he's got a really good runner and floater. He's at 50% shooting in the mid-range on 60 attempts, on half unassisted. So that's like super impressive. Yeah, there we go. 2.6 hooks and runners per game, hitting them at just under 50%. So like, yeah, I love Broom. He's an awesome player.
Yeah, no doubt. And I got slightly confused before, but I was talking about the Auburn Texas game earlier, where is the one where I thought he had a really good game all around, like 20 points, 12 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks. and showed off that touch that you're mentioning, like his soft touch at the rim, nice little post up hook shot. And I don't have. I think they pulled it out. I think Kaluma went off for 34 and 8 that game. But and I know Texas was losing by quite a bit, but yeah, Auburn ended up beating Texas in that game. So he did all that in a win against Texas while Arthur Kaluma was going off with 3-pointers trying to keep Texas in the game. So he like we mentioned, like the ups and downs are to be expected, especially for college guys. But his scoring versatility is something that you would think translates to just being like you said, hard to guard, like hard to stay in front of and actually stop from scoring because he can beat you in so many ways.
Yeah.
So we are, I think you're up next with the draft. You got some good options on the table. We've only, if I didn't mention somebody, feel free to throw somebody else in the mix. But I think we've hit on a lot of the lottery. I mean, like we said, some of these guys could go lottery, some of them could go second round. So, who would you take next off the board?
As far as big prospects, I would take Noah Penda, who I'm super high on. And I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I think people kind of get around to international prospects just later because it's like a longer season and you have more time to do that. But I think people are really sleeping on how good he's been in the Jeep Elite, in the French league. He is. I was trying to pull this up. I think he's top 5 in steals in the league. Yeah, he's number 4 in the league in steals per game, and he's number 1 in blocks per game. At 6'7", I want to say. 6'8", 225 pounds. He's just like such a smart defender. He's super physical. You can't beat him off his spot, right? He's like super, super strong, like center level strong, in my opinion. And like he's a quick leaper. Again, I'm really high on the hand-eye coordination of Flagg, Noah Penda, and Colin Murray-Boyles all together. The big question mark is the offensive game with Penda. His 2-point percentage is like horrific, but he's a good passer. He can like move the ball pretty well. He's a little creative with the ball. He's been a decent catch and shoot threat. I think he's like low 30s from 3. He's 35% from 3 this season on 2.8 attempts per game. So like there's some upside there. 69% from the line. There's a chance he shoots from the outside. He'll be a good passer. He's just super strong, super versatile defensively. He's like such a Powell type, questionable shooter, high assists to turnover ratio, and like versatile defender who gets stocks. That's like what I want to build around, So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Penn is a great choice there. I mentioned him on a previous podcast, and what stood out right away was his energy. Like he just plays with a crazy high motor. I was talking to Stone Hansen about him a few weeks ago, and like he might not be a future star upside guy, but if you're just looking for high impact defender who can make connective passing, be a part of a good lineup, and can be a good off-ball play finisher, was efficient on spot-ups, cuts, putbacks, just that energy. Like he just looks like he just drank a Red Bull right before hopping on the court. Like he's just always jittery out there, but in a positive way where he's not reckless with it, but he's constantly moving, constantly attacking the glass for the rebounds. Good off-ball stampede mover where he's making the cuts ahead of time with a head of steam and hit the catch and shoot threes. So he can kind of spread the floor a little bit. He can attack the closeout. He can move with a little head of steam and fight on glass for rebounds. So good, a lot of good winning basketball traits that he brings. So it's a good call for the next pick there. Yeah. And man, there's a lot of bigs to talk about. We don't have to hit on necessarily all of them because you can get pretty deep in the draft here to do that. But maybe one more pick a piece here of who we're liking, and I am between two guys for the next pick. I'm trying to decide where I would take either one. They're both kind of high risers at this point, and I I'm kind of intrigued by the potential of Danny Wolf as a pick and roll guy, like what he's doing with Michigan, a 7-footer, running a lot of pick and rolls. And then I come back and lean towards like Rasheer Fleming and his spot up ability as a catch and shoot three guy, and then kind of more traditional big man stuff. But I'll just take Danny Wolf for the upside for the fun of it. We're in draft mode. Let's draft an upside guy, and like I mentioned, Michigan's playing 2 7-footers, and one of them's running point guard. He's had 51 reps as the point guard, and he's in the 81st percentile of pick and roll ball handler via synergy with 0.94 points per possession. He's also effective on transition at 0.97 and effective 31 possessions on spot ups at 1.129, 79th percentile, and also been efficient on ISOs, but only about 15 of them, but 1.1 points per possession there. He's super efficient in terms of like true shooting percentage. He's at 65% true shooting. He's got a pretty flat assist to turnover of just 1 assist per turnover, and his free throw percentage isn't crazy high despite the 3-point percentage being pretty high. He's 39% on threes, but only 63% on free throws. And so I'm interested in kind of his like vision as a pick and roll guy. He's clearly knows the game, has good feel for the game. He's able to operate the offense, and just an interesting story where he transferred from the Ivy League and is now like playing going from Yale to Michigan, and like what's he doing on Yale, and now he's just got these touches as a pick and roll 7-foot guy on Michigan running the show. So I'm interested in how those skills translate. Maybe Fleming might be the safer pick of the two in terms of just translating right to the league, but I'm just kind of interested where that's heading, because clearly he can be something of maybe a handoff hub, get some inverted pick and rolls going, can hit the 3 ball at the moment, and can kind of score efficiently. And so what I mentioned before were all his scoring rates. As when you include passers, it actually improves even farther, where he's at 110 possessions as a pick and roll ball handler, including passes, and he's creating 1.2 points per possession for his team, which is in the 95th percentile, and also slightly higher with ISOs, where he's at 21 ISOs, including passes, 1.04 point per possession. Let's just go PPP, 75th percentile, and then post ups not as high, but 0.9 PPP on 30 possessions, including passes. So he's got vision. He's a 7-footer. He can run pick and roll. He can shoot the 3, and just an interesting story. And it kind of excited to see where those developable ball skills kind of pan out for him.
Yeah, he's fun. I would have taken him next too. I think like the turnovers are the biggest question with him, but I kind of think they're like the good kind of turnovers where he's like, if it works, you're getting an open layup, versus like just lazy or like dribbling off his feet or something like that. Like their turnovers trying to like find a really good outcome. So yeah, I like that. I like that pick a lot.
Yeah, and efficient on catch and shoots. He's taken 31 of them, but 42% on catch and shoot 3-pointers. So that number goes up a little bit. So you can kind of envision like an inverted pick and roll with him running the ball, or switching it to a normal one where he pops out for 3, and a little versatility in the 2-man game there. So one more pick for our 2025 big man only NBA draft. Where are you leaning?
All right, I've got someone who I also think is like being very underrated in draft talks, which is Villanova's Eric Dixon. He's kind of a hot take, but he's kind of like, he's a stretch 4 basically. I mean, he's 6'8", but he's super like wide and strong. He's rebounded like pretty well over his career, especially in the offensive glass, but has kind of transitioned more to be a perimeter threat, where he's shot over his career now. He's an 82% shooter from the line. He's 86% this year. Over his career, he's 40% on 433 3-point attempts. So like, we have a high degree of confidence. That's like as confident as you can get that this guy's going to be like a legit 3-point shooter, and he's 6'8". This year, he's taken 120 threes, and he's made 48% of them. So he's like blistering. She's the best shooter of any forward or above in college basketball right now, I think pretty convincingly. Also 41% from the mid-range, 60% at the rim. Just not a very good athlete in general, where he gets some steals, some blocks, some rebounds, but he's not going to be a difference maker there. But we need somebody to plug and play as this floor stretcher who's going to get those shots, who's going to be really good catch and shoot, who can also like create a shot off the dribble a little bit. Like, I think he's a super high floor player in that way and give NBA minutes.
Yeah, and just checking out his synergy as you were bringing him up, like he's super efficient as well in a bunch of different play types. I mean, like basically everything is 1.0 or above except for ISOs and like cuts, pick and roll ball handler, kind of low volume, but right at 1.0, and really stands out. Pick and roll man 1.6. You mentioned the efficient shooting, especially from downtown, where he's 46% on catch and shoot threes, and then also 51% on off the dribble threes. So like versatile shooter, versatile scorer, like lights out from deep. That's a guy that shooting translates at the end of the day, especially later in the draft where you're trying to find it. Like I think I've said this before on the pod, but I think at some point in the draft you stop star hunting and you're just trying to find good basketball players that can help you build a winning team. And not everyone is going to be a star. In fact, there's probably, I don't know, like a very low chance that you're going to find a star, but a better chance that you can target somebody that does winning basketball things. And I keep that pretty simple as somebody that can defend their own position, show a little defensive versatility, and be able to switch a little bit, and then can dribble, pass, and shoot offensively, and kind of surround a star with two-way winning impact. Two-way versatility is like what I'm always looking for. And so especially later in the draft, maybe it's more of just doing one thing really well on one end and one thing well enough on the other end. So you can be a 3-and-D role player and still play minutes in this league. And everyone's not also going to be a playoff guy, but that's what you're targeting. But guys still make the league, even if they're a one-way guy that might be a bench player for a while and might not necessarily be a winning player. But it just depends on people target different things in the draft. A lot of people target scoring and just want bucket getters, and I would translate more to like good basketball player just meaning something a little different and being more of a well-rounded player when it comes to scouting in the draft. So that makes sense. He's a lights out shooter, that's Dixon, and that's a skill that translates to every level, and you can see him sliding right into an offense with that kind of shooting. So no doubt. Well, I appreciate you hopping on the pod today, Matt. It was a lot of fun talking about this draft, last year's draft, and just super impressive to see all these big men develop these skills that makes it a little unfair to be a guard these days. And there's only so much time left, it feels like, before the average height just continually rises to like 6'6", 6'7" point guards, and then 7 foot plus big men, and everybody being able to do everything and really trying to find the nitty gritty, carve out what the differences are between these players at some point, where if everyone can dribble, pass, and shoot and defend, like what separates them as prospects. And obviously it's how well they do those things as well that really becomes a differentiating factor, and how consistent they do them as well. So, it's super interesting where the league's headed. We're already here in some ways with the modern wave of the skilled big men taking over. So it's cool to see the next couple classes on the rise. So appreciate you taking the time today. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a great time. Yeah,
no doubt. You can find Matt's work on Swish Theory, some of my work on Swish Theory. Got to represent the Swish team. Check out theswishtheory.com, and appreciate y'all for listening.